Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about the Finger Lakes. I got some exciting things to talk about, so I'm going to just jump into it. Thanks for joining me. Let's see what's up. So these are the Finger Lakes. They are said to have formed in glaciers. So this video I found has pretty good animation of it. So apparently there's a plateau here, so that's worth noting. Let's just throw it in. Allegheny Plateau. I guess it's that whole stretch. Okay, so generally here is a relative plateau, I guess, known as the Allegheny Plateau. I've never heard of that. I've heard of Allegheny. Just not plateau, but that makes sense. Okay, anyway. But so essentially the concept is that the ice is advancing. I'm just gonna mute this. Pardon me, ma'am. And then it advances, but it runs into this plateau. Notice what it does here. A chakra. Has this section chakra across, relatively. Okay. And then from there, it runs into so much resistance, like this advancing glacier from the Ice Age. The most recent Ice Age, I guess, I believe, in the Wisconsinian, but it advances here, so it advances actually over top of this. So these are forming below the chakra. See, they're gone, like they're actually up here. So they all get covered by this advancing ice sheet. And then they run into, which runs into resistance, basically. Is running into resistance, is pushing a boundary here into the advancing ice sheet, or into the Allegheny Plateau. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, it is pushing generally, and then it can't push further at the whole width, so it has like a chakra form at a point here, where then essentially it then carves these very straight paths that then reach into this dendritic system that starts to just fork into energy into the plateau. But notably, even though the chakra's this way, it connects over this way, over this way, over this way, and back up over this way, down over this way, through here to this thing, whatever's going on here that made it like optimal to build like cities around relatively, which then kind of stops, but also like my thoughts are it continues, because if you look here, it goes this way, this way, this way, this way, and then just continues, even with like a track there that's somewhat visible. I haven't thought about where this might be pointing, like more so like this way. If I follow this, I don't know if it's pointing maybe at there. So like related to the pressure from like Lake Superior's draining. It's draining this way, so it has a like pressure pushing it this way maybe. But then it runs into here, goes around, goes over this way, goes over this way. But maybe there is a degree of current going across more directly, that like the energy is transferred to encourage that, possibly. Or it's just running into resistance, like the plateau over here is too much resistance, so it just carves a way out this way. And notably, this goes atop the this stretch right here is like where the finger legs start slash stop, which I mentioned before in regard to going like this way and out over there. So there's geometric aspects that we're looking at. Where this goes across here, over here, above this thing. And then it also goes this way to here, to this thing. And if we look here, it goes down this way, through here to here, and then through here to here. So it's got these drainage points that form from the chakra that forms at the here. Notably, if we look at it though, so I made some before. Let's just go up. So I took some pictures. Here's the finger legs with this another chakra type thing there, maybe even where it then bends. But I notice there's generally like an inner circle here around that chakra even. I don't know if I even had seen that chakra video, this video yet, explicitly. But then around that is it's really rounded. If you look at it, it's rounded. Around this, and if you look over here, there's this like going this way. It's subtle over here, but it's almost like there's a continuation of a circle. Like if I open this protractor tool and I make it larger and bring it over here, like of that nature. It's not, I was thinking the circle went all the way over to there. So maybe it's not like a perfect circle. But generally, like, this is a quite circular boundary relative to the chakra of the Finger Lake. So it strongly points to there being a reason. Let's see what angle this is. If it's going like that way. Something of that nature, something of that nature. 40 degrees. Anyway, but there's at least a semicircle here, portion of a circle with a nucleus off of the larger circle that's kind of here. Maybe off of it, like actually, like here's a circle, just a circle that ends here as a boundary of an eddy that was forming generally here. But then there's another eddy forming generally here that then has that boundary reminiscent of a couple videos ago, maybe the one's about Mount Grenard, where I was talking about somewhere over here. This eddy here having another eddy here that has a nucleus here going around to that point. And then having another nucleus here with another eddy generally here. I know it's in the like built up terrain, but I'm largely interpreting the terrain to be dependent on, or the buildings and so on to be dependent on the terrain enough where there's an actual boundary, like I was talking about in that one, where there's a nucleus here that has a boundary around it generally here. And so its furthest boundary of this thing reaches the boundary of this one's, but then this one crosses over where this boundary basically goes to this nucleus. And then this one has an outer ring that goes to this one's inner nucleus. So they're essentially doing the same thing, where there's an interaction to a specific point, where this one has a outer circle that goes to this inner circle boundary, like the boundary maybe more so over here than like the center. Let's see if we put a huge protractor here just to get an idea, kind of like that, something of that nature. That like goes to there, generally wraps around this thing circularly, and then goes to that boundary-ish. I mean, it wasn't exact, but just like the one in Gurnard, like those weren't perfect circles. They were based on complex current flows like in the ocean, as too is this, where they're just like approaching circular because they're just basically eddies forming, but then they interact with other eddies, so they have more nuance. Like maybe this boundary here kind of points down to some kind of natural divide between the two that formed, like some other energetic boundary point, although it's not visible down here just by that straight, like that's very hexagonal looking for some reason. So there's a lot of boundaries involved here, and this going on. And I said wheels within wheels. I'm definitely calling this video wheels within wheels at this point. Drew this, or took that picture, and notably, this is where it gets really interesting, is impact, impact, impact. Notice that drain point I just pointed out here. There's that current that went generally from over here. And then the other current that goes this way, this way, this way, this way, here. And then another path that goes across this way and goes out this way that I talked about before. And goes over here. So 3 impacts. Uno, dos, tres. I don't know what, but 51 million, 35 million, 35 million. I'm saying these formed by cross currents. Current coming out this way, current coming out this way, current coming out this way, interacting with a current generally going, I believe, this way, like in a big circle, possibly this way. I'm not completely sure which direction the water was flowing, although the undercurrent was definitely going this way, so it's probably at least at some point flowing this way. The thing is, notably, again, very notably, 51 million is after 66 million, meaning when the Earth expanded. Like 550 million, it started to build up pressure under the crust and like do things, but only at 66 million did the continents break apart and expand to a new radius that was substantially different than it was before 66 million. And so what we see happening is the Earth expands, new ocean crust is forming in that time frame. That's when all of the oceanic crust is forming. That's like post 70 million. All this like deep red, orange, and even approaching yellow. All of this formed after 66 million after the Earth began to rapidly expand. So there was just no ocean floor with this amount of volume or surface area and volume. Like there wasn't as much space to contain the water. So then the Earth starts to expand, and what happens over here? It starts to drain into the ocean. This then is etching, like, oh, there's a place to go over here, and it just etches a path. Etches a path. Etches a path over here to a point where now it's raining. Hopefully my power doesn't go out. I don't know if I can find it. In one of these lectures, he talks about this drainage patterns. There's this one over here drains into the Ontario Lake right now. These two drain opposite. They all were formed by advancing glaciers moving this way, etching into the crust. So when the glaciers retreat, the back pressure is gone. So over here it flows this way, but then these ones, this region flows this way, and I guess this way. That's kind of what I'm interpreting. Let's see. Like H maybe goes down to Chesapeake, and B maybe goes over to this region, to Tom's Canyon one. And then this goes maybe up this way. I'm not completely sure. It'd be useful to like look at the exact paths these rivers are taking. Things of that nature, I'm not sure how to find data on as easily as some other things. I'm sure it's out there, but it's probably much more technical places that are harder to find. Watershed related. So, yeah, so it formed a chakra here. Also, they mentioned like the ice was really thick here, almost like it formed like a nucleus. I'm really thinking it formed a nucleus. Which then currents just pressed underneath, even more so, etching into the crust here, I guess, causing those, but ultimately like still running into the Allegheny Plateau. So the only thing it could do was etch pass through it, which it did because it had enough back pressure to just physically shoot the current through all of it to reach the ocean, where it could then drain, because essentially it's sideway pressure towards a lower elevation. Like being on a slope, just being on a slope. It's up high on a slope, so it drains down to a lower point. But back pressure over here pushes it through like a temporary higher elevation zone. Like here it's higher, but it had to have enough back pressure to etch through, and then it did. Got over here. Okay, so there's that, and there's that. So there's the pass. There's a impact, impact, impact. All of these are said to have formed millions of years ago, even though like, the lakes are from thousands of years ago. So there's no reason. In modern interpretation, there's an impact, there's an impact, there's an impact. And then later on, millions of years pass, right? And then suddenly these lakes form by glaciation, which then drains currents by literal coincidence and happenstance, because there's no other explanation for just like an impact structure to be like a point for this to drain to. Like maybe it could be argued that it was a lower elevation in some way, so it drained to it, but that much where it encouraged entire channels through, like that doesn't really make sense. So like it really points to just pure coincidence from a plate tectonics interpretation and modern interpretation of geology, but that makes no sense because there's a impacted literally all three of these, and they formed not 51 million years ago, but by this current flowing out of them that intersected with another current when it was able to get like, this one's a little anomalous because of how inland it is rather than being more out here. Let's look at it a little bit just for that sake. Possibly related to drainage from this path that's going this way over here and draining out. Water going around the Appalachians and then draining out along the coastline, involved in all the Carolina Bay formations, especially in drainage points like here. There's a bunch of them here in drainage paths from past this line. So there's definitely drainage coming off from this boundary, just kind of flowing out through this final stretch to the ocean. And it comes up here though, and then it really pinches. So maybe there's a flow that was coming out here, right here, that was maybe encouraged by the closing of this gap to go at a higher velocity, so that when this came this way, it went across and then across. Let's see, where's the, is it like there? I'm not actually sure where the Chesapeake Bay impact, where exactly it is. Okay, it's not, it's down here. Okay, it's at the boundary more so than I realized. Okay, that's actually not the worst position. It's down like right at the edge, like right here. Especially when there's things of this nature, suggestive that there's at least a degree of a current going like across it. So maybe just more generally, this is drained here, and then all of this current versus this current, plus the back pressure out here of other currents, maybe like holding enough resistance that this had to eddy more and like explode out a boundary enough. Bunch of drainage points over here too. Bunch of them. Probably like related to certain things. Not sure why it's not like literally to the coastline. It's probably because it's falling down a cliff here. Over here it's way less sloped, and then over here it's like picking up momentum. It starts to etch more. Over here it just subtly etched a path. But then it picks up momentum over here to fall into the ocean bed that's not filled yet because it's just forming because the earth is expanding, and so it has a lot of ocean bed that's just not filled with water. So it flows in. There's even sea level rises during this. Like the sea level dropped by 100 something meters during glaciation. I'm like, are you sure it's during glaciation, or maybe it was like the earth expanded and the sea level just like had much more volume to fill, so surface area and volume, so it just like spread out at a lower depth, and then like water flowed in from the crust, atop the crust, like here, over here, over this way, which brings to mind, came across Billy Carson yesterday, who was talking about the Red Sea being the Sea of Reeds, which is really interesting. Sea of Reeds. In the Exodus narrative, Yam Suf, or Reed Sea, is sometimes translated as Sea of Reeds, is the body of water which the Israelites crossed following their exodus from Egypt. The same phrase appears in over 20 other places in the Hebrew Bible. This has traditionally been interpreted as referring to the Red Sea, following the Greek Septuagint's rendering of the phrase. However, the appropriate translation of the phrase remains a matter of dispute, as does the exact location referred to. I was like, oh, I never really thought about the Red Sea all that extensively. I just kind of I did take their word for it that the Red Sea was the Red Sea in modern day, but I never was like deeply investigating enough to think otherwise, except maybe just knowing that there's a lot of things that are mislabeled nowadays like that. But this one, I think, slipped by me relatively. The Lord caused a shift to a very strong west wind, which lifted the locusts and hurled them into the Sea of Reeds. Not a single locust remained in all the territory of Egypt. So if Egypt, he seemed to be persuaded Egypt is generally Egypt, which kind of makes sense to me. Although I've heard otherwise, that it was something over in Yemen even. Although if it was in Yemen, then westward it'd actually have some feasibility. I was just thinking westward. Westward? Like, why would we interpret where it says westward wind? A west wind blows from. Oh, I see. Okay. Nix that then. I was thinking it actually was blowing west. I'd be curious to see. Exodus 19 Hebrew, maybe. A wind west. That's hard to say because the word west means a direction, and then a wind. Like, it's almost backwards the way we describe it, so it's totally feasible that they're saying a wind to the west. Like, why would you describe where it's coming from? If it's going east, it's going east. Like, it doesn't really make sense. I feel it's possible, given that, like, it's hard for us to say with certainty that they were saying in the language west wind was actually meaning a modern day interpretation of what a west wind is. I just don't know if that's even true. That might just be happenstance that it was translated as a west wind, but then west wind. Consider the mildest and most favorable. It's just backwards world. It could mean either thing. Term, origin. Origin of term. Whatever. still don't know by looking at this that unequivocally means that. Like, it almost could mean either. The reason I'm looking at this is because I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if over here, Trans-Saharan Seaway, in the similar way, oh my god, this fits with what I was generally thinking. Although this is actually it goes this way and up, but then this way and down because it's coming out and across. I feel like it's not capturing the totality of what was happening. Long story short, I thought it would be interesting if perhaps the Trans-Saharan Seaway was the Reed Sea. Like, it's gone completely now. I don't know. Reed Sea in Bible. Let's see all of its mentionings again. Calls Israel to set out from the Sea of Reeds. Okay. God led the people round about by way of the wilderness at the Sea of Reeds. Now the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has cast into the sea, and the pick of his officers are drowned in the Sea of Reeds. Then Moses caused Israel to set out from the Sea of Reeds. They went on into the wilderness of Shur, traveled 3 days in the wilderness, and found no water. Found no water. That sounds like the desert. Like if they're crossing this region and come over here. I'm not saying that's what's happening or fits data whatsoever. I'm just looking at this to see. I will set your borders from the Sea of Reeds to the Sea of Philistia, from the wilderness to the Euphrates. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hands, and you will drive them out before you. I'd have to look in larger picture. This is pretty early. This is in the Old Testament. Who split apart the Sea of Reeds? His steadfast love is eternal, and made Israel pass through it. His steadfast love is eternal. Who hurled Pharaoh and his army into the Sea of Reeds? His steadfast love is eternal. Let's go. Let's see if it occurred more than once. The first event during 2 intervals in the late Cretaceous. The first event was in the latest 97 million radiometric dating, and was reestablished after the Earth expanded, basically. Or just as it was about to. Okay, actually, 90. So it had like a 7 million year hiatus, which is really not that long in terms of actual amount of time. As we're noting, like there was these things were forming thousands of years ago, yet they're dated basically simultaneous. 35, or I think 35. Two of them are 35. One is like 57 or whatever, 51. These two are 35. This one's 51. It's almost like a current went this way, but was getting overwhelmed and like turned the forced the pressure, like it couldn't go through as well. So the current over here that needed out started finding these other paths instead and took these two paths. Like it was one, and then it divided into two, which then divided into three. Due to interaction with another current that was dividing it. But that's totally possible that they went across the trans-Saharan region while this hiatus occurred. Let's try to find more information on this. Locus. What did that say about ammonoids and other something? The Lord will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt, and he will wave his hand over the river with his scorching wind. He will strike it into 7 streams and make men walk over dry shot. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. I will fix your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of Philistines, from the wilderness to the river Euphrates. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you will drive them out before you. Which is near. Also build a fleet of ships in as earth has quaked at the noise of their downfall. There is an outcry. Noise of it has been heard at the Red Sea. This is what the Lord says concerning the Ammonites. What the? Oh, crazy. Has Israel no sons? Has Israel no heir? Why then has Moloch taken possession of Gad? Why do his people live in its towns? But the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will sound the battle cry against Rabbah of the Ammonites. It will become a mound of ruins, and its surrounding villages will be set on fire. Then Israel will drive out those who drove her out, says the Lord. Wail, Heshbon, for Ai is destroyed. Ai? Wow. Cry out, you inhabitants of Rabbah. Put on sackcloth and mourn. Rush here and there inside the walls, for Moloch will go into exile together with his priests and officials. Why do you boast of your valleys so fruitful? Unfaithful daughter Ammon, you trust in your riches and say, who will attack me? I will bring terror on you from all those around you, declares the Lord Almighty. Every one of you will be driven away, and no one will gather the fugitives. Yet afterward I will restore the fortunes of the Ammonites, declares the Lord. The fortunes of the Ammonites. Wow. Concerning Edom, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Is there no longer wisdom in Teman? Has counsel perished from the prudent? Has their wisdom decayed? Turn and flee, hide in deep caves, you who live in Dedan. For I will bring disaster on Esau at the time when I punish him. If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? If thieves came during the night, would they not steal only as much as they wanted? But I will strip Esau bare. I will uncover his hiding places so that he cannot conceal himself. His armed men are destroyed, also his allies and neighbors, so there's no one to say, leave your fatherless children, I will keep them alive. Your widows too can depend on me. This is what the Lord says. If those who do not deserve to drink the cup must drink it, why should you go unpunished? You will not go unpunished, but must drink it. I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that Basra will become a ruin and a curse, an object of horror and reproach, and all its towns will be in ruins forever. I've heard a message from the Lord, an envoy was sent to the nations to say, assemble yourselves to attack it, rise up for battle. Now I will make you small among the nations, despised by mankind. The terror you inspire and the pride of your heart have deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rocks, who occupy the heights of the hill. Though you build your nest as high as the eagles, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. Edom will become an object of horror. All who pass by will be appalled and will scoff because of all its wounds. As Sodom and Gomorrah were overthrown along with their neighboring towns, says the Lord, so no one will live there, no people will dwell in it. Like a lion coming up from Jordan's thickets to a rich pasture land, I will chase Sodom from its land in an instant. Who is the chosen one I will appoint for this? Who is like me, and who can challenge me? And what shepherd can stand against me? Therefore, hear what the Lord has planned against Edom, what he has purposed against those who live in Teman. The young of the flock will be dragged away, their pasture will be appalled at their fate. At the sound of their fall, the earth will tremble. Their cry will resound to the Red Sea. Look, an eagle will soar and swoop down, spreading its wings over Basra. Wing, deck and traps, maybe this region. In that day, the hearts of Edom's warriors will be like the heart of a woman in labor. Is that the only mention of the Red Sea? I guess so. Okay, that's the only mention of the Red Sea, so that's that. Okay, that's just an interesting thought that maybe there's something to that. I was thinking over here, like these currents, but also the Trans-Saharan Seaway. Something to do with over here where it doesn't look like there's a sea anymore, but maybe there was. Okay, before I distract myself from the Finger Lakes too much, I think that's good for this video. See you guys in the next one. Peace out.